WesWes Show.
Kia ora, talofa lava, and welcome to the Ruck, a podcast where we discuss all things rugby. I'm the host of the Ruck, Stace, so thanks for joining us for another episode. We're joined today by a lot of our Ruck regular panel. So I'll start by introducing everyone. So firstly, we've got from the City of the Future and a senior WesWes columnist, Joey Nanai. Joey, brother, thanks for jumping on us.
Thanks for having me once again.
Nice, brother. Also, we have probably a validated brother, Ian Foster's number one fan there, Rog. Rog, thanks for jumping on, brother. Nice. Right, boys, so before we get into it, I'll take care of some housekeeping for us. So check out our website, www.WesWesNet.com, and don't forget to click the support us button on the page to keep the content flowing. We also have some exclusive content on there for our supporters, so definitely some additional benefits there. I'll also mention you can follow the Ruck on Twitter and Facebook, so give us a follow and give us a like on there. All right, boys, the World Cup, it's in full swing. So we're at the business end of the season now. We've seen some cracking quarterfinals. Some of the best I think I've probably ever seen at the World Cup. I thought we'd start by looking at some of our predictions from the group stage way back in the day when we started our podcast World Cup preview and see what we thought would happen and just look at some of the things that potentially went wrong with some of our predictions. So firstly, in Pool A, we picked France and New Zealand to get through. So that was a pretty easy prediction. Secondly, Pool B, Ireland and South Africa we picked. So far, so good. This is where it gets a little bit funny. Pool C, Wales and Fiji got through. We picked collectively Australia and Fiji to get through. And lastly, Pool D, England and Argentina. So we picked England and Samoa. So not too bad there. Two teams which we thought might get through didn't get through. I know, Joey, mate, I'll come to you first, brother, because I know you had hopes for Australia, and I also thought they'd get at least out of that pool, considering Wales' poor form pre-tournament. But do you want to touch on that? What went wrong for the Wallabies, in your eyes?
Oh, what didn't go wrong? I think a lot of rugby pundits around the world will agree with me that the first thing that probably went wrong that Eddie took a big risk on was, going for a youthful side selection versus mixing it up with some older heads who are a bit more experienced and could pass on that experience. Obviously, Eddie has explained himself that he's got an eye for the future in terms of why he chose a squad largely filled with youth. And as a fan of Eddie himself as a coach, I get it, but at the same time, I still think it was too huge a risk, given that it's World Cup, and given that these weren't young fellas who were tried and true. These were green guns who Eddie believes in their talents even now. He still believes in the talents that they bring and believes he chose the right people. He had the right people. They just, didn't gel at the right time, and obviously need more time together as a squad to be able to produce the kind of results that, we enjoyed on the weekend, which was the quarterfinals. So Eddie has, admittedly said that Aussie squad that he selected and took over there, they are definitely not up to the standard of rugby that we saw in the quarterfinals, and he hopes that it will get to that point with the core of the squad for the 2027 World Cup in Australia. So, do we have 4 years to wait and see? Who knows? But I guess the Rugby Australia have already put their money where their mouths are and have invested in him until the end of that World Cup in Australia. So we'll see. I guess is going to be the tagline. But also, Eddie himself probably knew in the back of his mind that although they weren't going to get the results that everyone wants them to get, and you would expect a country to go for in a World Cup, he always had in his mind that, it'll be a better experience for those young lads in the long run, because now that they've got that out of the way, when it comes to the next World Cup, they will be, I guess, in his eyes, battle hardened. But it still doesn't please all the old heads who've played and bled for Australia in that golden jersey. So, yep. Even though it was my prediction that Australia were going to win the World Cup, they didn't. So, that was a big, massive L on my part in terms of my prediction. I even put my money where my mouth was.
Oh,
Didn't win the bet. So, and we're only in semi-final stage, and I lost that bet. So, fuck you, Australia.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I agree with all that, mate. The selections of youth, that was a real head scratcher, because the World Cup isn't really a time for rebuilding and picking unknown guys and sort of hoping it works out. So we saw guys like, Michael Hooper doing commentary back in Australia, and to his credit, he was actually quite good, so that might be his future. Quite Cooper's another guy on the sidelines as well, and you think, shucks, how much would they have benefited from those experienced guys? Because their first five, whose name escapes me, I mean, they sort of chucked him in the deep end before he's ready, and I felt for him. And they could have used someone like Quaid, especially just some playmaking. But Rog, what did you make of Australia? Not getting through that pool stage as well, because I think that was one of the ones that we didn't get in our predictions.
I think when it was what was their score against Wales? They won. They lost.
They lost. Oh, they got pumped. I don't remember the score, but they got beat. They got humiliated in. I remember Wolf Skelton was in tears, and that Fijian loose forward, whose name escapes me, he was also crying. That was Valentini. He was in tears as well. I don't remember the score, but I think it was quite comprehensive. And I think we thought that might be one of the games of the pool stages as well, which didn't turn out to be a bit of a fizzer, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I think they started off with they started with a 35-15 win over Georgia, and they were making some noise about how that was one of their first wins in a wee while. And then Wales result, because in Fiji beat Australia after their close loss to Wales in their opener. Then I think it was what was that score? They did get pumped. 40 points to 6.
Yeah.
Oof. So what is that? What is that saying? It's like, I don't know. They could have used a hooper. They were definitely missing a hooper. Just his experience and was missed, and the way that he's always carrying the ball and how he can jackal and steal ball and ruck, being competitive. But it is what it is. Hooper accepted his fate, and Australia were moving on. And I think there was something, a comment that came out of Australian Rugby. The CEO mentioned that was the very reason why they went with Eddie Jones, was because they wanted to go deep into the competition to prevent what was happening, to prevent them not making it into the quarterfinals or even beyond that. So I think it was 16-3, 16-6 at half time. So Australia didn't score any points in the second half. But this comes down to, Eddie Jones playing mind games at every sort of press conference about, that all the journalists always ask silly questions or they don't understand rugby. Just being real sort of undermining and belittling journalists when they're just trying to answer ask a simple question and he would never give a straightforward answer. It's always got to be a trivial sort of response from Eddie Jones, and as we've known, and sometimes because more often than not, he's been able to come out the other end and trump what the journalists or what the naysayers are trying to make a point about when they question his tactics, when they question his selections. But they obviously went with youth, looking to build towards the future, towards the next World Cup, especially now. Australia's hosting the 2027 World Cup. Were they looking? Was it purposeful for that? I don't know. They had some real inexperience. There was the long hair blondie that they were playing at first five.
Gordon.
Yeah. It wasn't up to it, unfortunately, which is a bit of a bummer. And they've gone with Eddie Jones, and they're going to have to. We know he's a good coach, so even though this World Cup isn't the greatest in terms of his coaching resume, we know that he's quality, and I'm hoping he can turn it around, because from a New Zealand side, we need Australia to be good. And you talked about those antics before, Rog. I think one thing we sort of talked about this offline before we started our podcast, but one thing that Eddie Jones, I don't think he realised, was how big the task was and how much work was needed to sort of get Australia to where they needed to get to as a rugby nation. And that's where I think some of his antics were coming from. It was sort of like, all you journalists, everyone, all the media, write your stories about me and what I'm doing and my antics, and not take pressure off my team and their performances. And to some extent it worked, because we weren't talking necessarily about how bad Australia was, in the pool stages and in the build-up. It was a lot about, the Eddie Jones antics and all the rest of it. But the flip side of that is, the team has to eventually start winning once that pressure's taken off them and start putting in performances. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. So, I know Eddie Jones is, like I said before, he's a quality coach. I'm hoping he can turn it around for these bloody Wallabies. Another one which we didn't get right, Pool D, probably a bit of a hard pick. We thought Samoa would get out of that pool. Joey, mate, you got any thoughts on that one? Talk us through Samoa's campaign and why they didn't advance to the knockout stages, in your opinion.
Oh, mate, I just think, just from watching all their games, certain key areas of, the team, the selections, they just didn't gel together in terms of combinations on the day. There are certain individual bits and pieces that were great, but then, simple mistakes just crept into the game at crucial times. And, there was some risk taking, which I really enjoyed as a rugby fan. I enjoyed seeing risk taking, like fancy passes against the grain, but the ball just didn't go to hand for one reason or another. Unfortunately for Samoa, I think they are more suited to dry weather than wet weather, and that's not making an excuse on their behalf. Just this French tournament, if you want to call it that, this tournament in France, most of the games that I watched, in fact, most of the games that were played, had some level of humidity and moisture from the sweat, from the rain, and sometimes in some of those games. And the ball, although you have good intentions to do backline moves and slick passing and that kind of thing, more often than not, you would see the ball not go to hand. And there were a couple of passes there by Manu Samoa's halfback with the bleached hair. I can't remember his name, but
Tom
Martini, yeah. There was some balls that he, if his flick passes and things like that went to hand, they would have led to something good. But unfortunately they didn't, and they were in crucial times of the game where we're trying to get a roll on in our scrum. We'd win the scrum, but then we would drop the ball in the backs. And time again, as a fan, you don't want to see that. You'd rather see it go through the hands and see what we can do out wide, rather than, these 50-50 passes that just go to the ground and then we allow the opposition back in that moment. And, we struggle to get some momentum in the game. And because of that, we don't put ourselves in a position to win the set piece, to win, the rucks, to win the mauls, to win, the basic ball to hand, pass to the next man kind of rugby that we are good at, but just too many mistakes crept in, I thought. And unfortunately, we didn't advance to a quarterfinal or even to the top two in the table. So not only did we not get out of the pool, we didn't automatically qualify for the next tournament. And that sucks. That really sucks. We had the talent. We had some really talented players over there. We had some good selections there in terms of squad. And, take nothing away from Seilala. He did the best with what he had. And unfortunately, when it comes to game day and putting a whole bunch of blokes together, I'm not sure what their lead up was like to the World Cup, but I just felt these guys, probably like Australia, didn't spend enough time together as a squad to learn each other's, natural movements and, get that practice and training drilled into you so that, things become second nature. You know what your mate next to you is going to do, so you can anticipate with what you're going to do next. So that all those little kind of rugby things that become second nature to a rugby player that's been around the traps long enough. I just don't think they had that because, one, they don't play in the same clubs before they come to the World Cup, but two, they don't spend enough time together. Maybe this World Cup was enough for those younger blokes to learn from each other and, take it into the in-between World Cups test matches. But, yeah, I think I agree with Seilala as well that, there's just not enough matches against tier 1 nations. And it sucks when you hear that Samoa hasn't played against a team like England or the All Blacks in a long time. And when they do get to play against them, Samoa has to bring their A game and hope for the best that, a team like England play badly. And that's the only way we're going to get our win in between World Cups, because we just don't get enough of those types of opportunities to play against a tier 1 nation. And I don't know who is to blame for that or who can help make that better, but yeah, it sucks.
Yep, agree with all that. So you're right, Samoa finished 4th in their group, just ahead of Chile.
Damn.
So they need to re-qualify again. And you make a good point about how the team, there's no, they're not gelling well, and they look like a team who played a lot together. So I remember Seilala, the Manu Samoa coach, he actually lamented that same fact. That Samoa, I think they've only played 12 tests in this World Cup cycle. And that's nowhere near enough to prepare a team to be competitive come World Cup time. So hopefully World Rugby can do a bit more to help the Tier 2 teams out and sort out a better schedule for them. But Rog, I know Samoa's a team close to your heart, mate. What did you make of Manu Samoa's campaign? And what's next for Samoa? Where do they need to improve in your eyes?
I mean, you guys have both touched on what Seilala mentioned, and I think where I was sort of trying to pinpoint where people are easy to blame selections or Samoa's such a frustrating team to support, especially at Rugby World Cups. But, it all comes back to what you've already mentioned. It's academic. 12 tests in 4 years before this particular Rugby World Cup, and only 2 of those were against Tier 1 nations. So how can you prepare for, the pinnacle of a rugby player's career to try and get to a Rugby World Cup, and let alone a nation to try and prepare? Awesome achievement just to try and make the Rugby World Cup finals. Similarly to like the FIFA World Cup, teams will get to that and then, not necessarily they realise that they're going to be up against the bigger powers. So you think about Samoa being one of those minnows or being a Tier 2 nation coming to the Rugby World Cup this year. And it was almost like they improved throughout the competition. So when I think the scores where they improved, they lost to, well, first of all, they beat their first game against Chile 43-10. So, and that was to be expected. But then they went on and narrowly lost to Argentina 19-10. In Argentina, obviously they play in the Rugby Championship, so they're regulars of playing Tier 1 nations. Excuse me. And then they come up against Japan, and again a game that a lot of punters would expect Samoa to take, but again we lose only by 6 points, 28-2. In the last game of the round, once it's a dead rubber for Samoa, they can't advance anymore. And they lose by 1 point to England, who are now in the semi-finals. And one would say that's a great result for Samoa, yet and a bad result for England, but then a win's a win, right? And they advance into the competition, into the not only the quarterfinals, but now they find themselves in the semi-finals this weekend. But my case in point is that they're pretty much preparing for Rugby World Cup at the Rugby World Cup. There's no games enough for them to prepare. So that's why the Wales of this world, England, they got the Six Nations, Ireland, and then you got our winter tests when we play a series either against France, Ireland, or England. So we've got those as well for Tier 1 nations. Then you've also got the Rugby Championship, whereas the Northern Hemisphere got the Six Nations. So they've got ample tests where they get hardened. They are able to blood a lot of players within the 3 years between Rugby World Cups. Samoa don't have that. They'll get the odd end of year tour to the Northern Hemisphere, but still a lot of it they're playing against Tier 2 nations. So just the gap is so far and far between. It's disappointing if Samoa don't make a World Cup, but we know they get there through qualifying. So a lot of their games are against those Tier 2 nations also trying to qualify to come to the Rugby World Cup. And maybe even less, is there another Tier 3? So, when they come up against the big names at a Rugby World Cup, and it's just not enough time for them to gel. So, as much as we would love and we wear our emotions on our sleeve in regards to Samoa, however, it's almost like that's probably a just result for them to improve so much that they lose to England by 1 point, albeit a controversial call from the TMO for that particular game. Samoa should have won that. We go back to the ruling that once a try is confirmed and the conversion takes place, you can't overturn. So I don't know whether there's a new regulation or someone's found something since, but it was it wasn't really talked about post that match. But Samoa, they fought tooth and nail in that game, and if anything, they were trying to wipe the smirk off Owen Farrell's smile there in his face, but almost got there in terms of getting the result. I felt they were very hard done by. And then again, we can go back to World Rugby. What are they doing for the Pacific Nation? What are they doing for the Fijis, the Tongas, the Samoa, and then all the other Tier 2 nations that are trying to compete against these powerhouses such as the Englands and the Irelands and even Wales. And then Italy, they'll be there always at the Six Nations, yet where's the improvement there from an Italian team? Yep, they may have internally they've improved. Maybe the results ain't as bad. They've got the odd win here and there in the Six Nations, but they've got the worst record at the Six Nations, hands down. When is it time to introduce, or are they just looking after their own? Has Italy got some sort of stakehold in that tournament? Because introducing a promotion relegation for the Tier 2 of the Six Nations, where you got your Belgians, your Germany, they're playing in it, and even Georgia. When Georgia doesn't get an inclusion, So the longer that Georgia is discarded, the more that they don't progress. And we've seen how they can play and how they can upset as well and get some results. But their progress is hindered from being shut out by World Rugby, despite the fact that they say they're pouring in money into the Tier 2 nations. But, Fiji gets a result over Georgia. And what's the difference with a Fiji to a Samoa? We've got all professional players playing in various competitions throughout the world. Fiji, I think to their credit, they had, and we mentioned it in a previous pod, that 18 of their players came from Fiji draw. So a good core group knowing how to play with each other. Then you got the other ones that are playing in the top 14, such as Tu Silva and Radradra. So, a lot of these players have played enough together. Samoa, unfortunately, we're just putting players together. And it's the disappointing thing is that that's the tale as old as time, is that we've got so many professional Samoan players playing all over the world, yet just not enough time to gel together and come together for, the pinnacle event, the Rugby World Cup.
Yep, I agree with all that. And that 12 tests you mentioned in the 2 against Tier 1 nations in that cycle, that is poor, but that was the story of their World Cup, because they look like 15 individuals out there a lot of the time. And that comes back to that preparation which you talked about. So I thought the components were there to make it to the playoffs, or at least finish third. But it's like, that old saying, the sum of the whole is, in this case, it isn't greater than the sum of the parts. And it's never going to be without the preparation. They look like people who hadn't played together. And, that's really unfortunate for Samoa, and particularly for fans like us who were pretty much hoping for the best for the Samoan national team. So hopefully that can change. And if that changes, along with the new eligibility rules, I still have high hopes. I think Mapusua has proven himself to be a pretty decent coach as well. So they just need more time together and more games to gel. And if they get
that's
that,
what they've been going on about, even in previous World Cups, not enough time together. But
that's true.
And it's still the same frustration for the same issues that haven't really changed. And then we see, how come some Tier 1 nations, just the way that the draw worked out, Scotland gets 2 weeks rest in between games. The All Blacks get 2 weeks as well. And yet all the other teams are, playing within the week or even less than a week. So all those sort of issues, and you're never even going to get a perfect draw where everyone has the same amount of rest, but at the same time, I think Samoa would probably had their best foot forward for this particular World Cup, because as much as that they were ill prepared in terms of not playing Tier 1 nations, they probably, more than any other World Cup, were able to have time together. But still, it's just not enough, despite them coming from, Division 1 top competitions like top 14, Super Rugby, and then the English Premiership. It's just that the cohesion's not there.
Yeah.
Great individual brilliance, even some of the guys playing in, excuse me, the MLR. Sama Malolo, the hooker. You got Ed Fido that play in the MLR as well. So these are guys that are going to, like Ed Fido, probably not sure if he'll make another World Cup. But that Sama Malolo, he's the goods, eh? And you got Ray Nuia, they got called back in to the squad. Seilala Lamb, he's in his early 30s, him and Ray. Will they be able to truck on for another World Cup? Time will tell, but you got a young guy in Malolo that could be, the future in that jersey. You see what he could do. But we just need to build on that, get more Tier 1 games. What is this Pacific Championship going to look like that they're, talking about? Is it going to include Tier 1 nations? We don't want to have Australia A or New Zealand A in that. New Zealand A and Australia A, they can have competition with Samoa A and Tonga A. But we need our number one team to be competing with, New Zealand on a regular basis, Australia, because New Zealand and Australia no longer South Africa, but Argentina, they're getting regular game with each other, and so that enhances them. And then you look at Argentina; they don't play domestically; they all play abroad as well. But I believe they've been the beneficiaries of their time in Super Rugby with the Jaguares and the Rugby Championship, and that's enhanced. And so it's no surprises that Argentina are able to replicate what they did in 2007 with Augustin Pichon by making the semi-finals. And their best ever finish is third place when they won the third and fourth playoff, despite losing a semi-final. So, Argentina are no pretenders. There's a reason why they're achieving this, and the reason why that I had no doubt that they were going to beat Wales, and England almost falling as well. So not counting them out with the quarterfinal, but those quarterfinals, as you mentioned, they were probably the closest quarterfinals that I can remember of all Rugby World Cups. They were all pretty close. So 29-17, Argentina-Wales. Great result for Argentina. I felt sorry for Anscombe not being included. I'm not sure if he's injured, but I could see he was frustrated in the stands. And then 30-24, man, Fiji they came back. It was almost like it reminded me of the grand final for the NRL. It was 20 minutes, and they just needed to score, and they did. And then that slow comeback, but it wasn't to be, but very good campaign for them. And then South Africa and France, another one-pointer. So France were very unlucky to get knocked out in their host Rugby World Cup, but more or less still a good campaign for them. It was going to be two of the top four knocked out, and unfortunately Ireland and France go home.
Yeah. Nice thoughts there, Rog. Agree with all of that. You started touching on the quarters, so we'll have a quick look at the quarters before we look at our semis. So that first one, like you said, Rog, Argentina against Wales, 29-17. So, Joey, man, I'm not sure if you caught much of that game, mate. That was a 4 a.m. kickoff. But did you catch any of it? What did you make of that quarter? We'll have a quick look at that one before we do some semi-final previews.
Argentina-Wales?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did catch some of it. Only the last bits, actually. Argentina... Well, actually, I caught the highlights of the game. And Argentina were a team that were behind on the scoreboard in the early stages of the game, and they were building. You couldn't really tell that they were building because they were playing defense for most of that first half,
right?
Where Wales were putting on the points. And I think it got to 10-0 at one point. So it kind of looked like, oh yeah, Wales could get away with this. They could, put a big lead on from here. But then there was a moment before halftime and after halftime where, if you're someone who's played rugby long enough and watched rugby long enough, you know that 10 minutes before halftime and that 10 minutes after halftime, vital towards, the final result of a game. Because the mental aspect in terms of whoever's got the momentum at that point or whoever scores a try at that point, whether it be the 10 minutes before halftime or 10 minutes after halftime, they kind of get that mental edge over the opposition. Because that 10 minutes or however long halftime is these days, that can really take away the momentum that you have as a team if you're leading into the first half, the halftime. But the first team to score after halftime is typically the team that has the momentum for the rest of the game or gets the final result. And that holds true for New Zealand. If you look at all the stats. Oh, actually, speaking of stats, Rog, I know you love stat. One of the great weekends, here's a headline for you. One of the great weekends in Rugby World Cup history saw 4 quarterfinals decided by an average of 6 points, with every game in the balance until the final minutes. 6
Nice.
points. Which, that speaks volumes of the kind of quality that you spoke of, Rog, when it comes to flip. Don't think we ever remember any quarterfinals that were this close or this great in terms of quality. And yeah, absolutely. Like every single quarterfinal that I watched, I thought far out. Even though Wales and Argentina, in terms of styles of play, and obviously Argentina rely heavily on their flair, and Wales a bit more on their structure. Oh, it was just beautiful to watch a team who seemingly were letting the opposition get away from them, come back and build their momentum, and end up winning the game the way that Argentina did. And I think just based on that and based on what we know of Argentina versus the All Blacks in the last few games they've had, they're going to be tougher than we probably realize as fans. I know the All Blacks won't take them lightly because they don't want to lose again. If you watched an interview that Dane Coles did, he doesn't want to lose in a semi-final like we did last time to England, because that sucks to play for third and fourth, like he said, right? He doesn't want to go through that again. So it's definitely going to be on the All Blacks' mind to put everything into the semi-final and land on the right side of the results table. So, yeah, it was a good game. The Wales and Argentina game was a good game. I thought Argentina did enough to grind out the win, and they are led by a captain who I think makes some really good calls during the game and leads by example. He didn't have a bad reserve coming on for him. So they've got some experience there in their scrum. They've got some big men who are experienced, and it was nice to see a Southern Hemisphere team get in.
Nice. Yeah.
Stick that up your pipe, Sir Clive Woodward, and smoke it.
Yeah. Wales were awesome, and they were winning for like long periods of that game, like you mentioned, Joey. I think it was 10-0. I think you're right. And they were in the lead for good chunks of that game. They just couldn't close it out at the end. And, when you think about Wales, they were so poor pre-tournament. They lost to Georgia. Their rankings, I think they dropped out of the top 10 for a period there. So I guess if you told, I've got an Irish mate, and I've got a Welsh mate, and if you told them at the start of the tournament, I've got a few actually.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, if you told them at the start of the tournament that they would win their pool and get through to the quarters, they probably would have taken it given their pre-tournament form. But now they could have won that quarterfinal, and then they would be through to the semi. So there's a lot of mixed feelings about Wales this tournament. And one thing I wanted to shout out for Boffelli, I saw him kicking these penalties from over 50 metres out. And, when you're giving away penalties in opposition half and they're kicking 3 points, it's like, shuck, that's a bit of a, and mentally that's a bit damaging. So Boffelli, he's been good for a long time. And I know Cam's brought that up in our, while we were doing some pre-talk about their quarterfinal. But Rog, mate, did you want anything to add on the Argentina-Wales before we look at the next quarter?
I think, for me, they were a different sort to the game that they played against England. It looked like that they reminded me of Argentina of the 90s, where they, it doesn't matter how much they try and penetrate the defense line, they couldn't quite get through. And it reminded me of the days of Contemporary when it just seemed like they didn't have the size to break the line. But they were almost a different sort this time around. You had Creevy, like you mentioned, Julian Montoya and Creevy, both Centurion hookers that play for Argentina. So awesome that when Creevy came on, he added a bit of impetus at the back of the maul and the ruck and in that scrum. So, but then also there was that try that you talk about scoring before half time and then after, Joey, and it was those penalties that kept them in because they didn't score a try until later on in the piece. I think it was through a ruck or more. They crashed over, but it was just the kicks that kept them in close vicinity to Welsh lead. and it was Bigger that scored a try early in the piece. They had a bit of a break. So they were able to penetrate and break some of the Argentinian defense and sort of show their intentions there. But it was an exciting game to watch. And then, you had the experience of Sanchez coming off the bench, and that's what broke the camel's back, was that intercept and then the try under the post, for him to go all the way. So, but Boffelli did keep them in, but then there was that moment where the Welsh winger, forget his name, Samoa, he almost scored it in the corner, and the number 23 managed to tackle him out, and he wasn't even able to get the ball across the line. So Argentina, really played well, and they deserved their place in the semi-final. But that's how close it was for Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere tussle there. But I was really glad. I just wanted to see the end of the back of Bigger.
Another non-Bigger fan.
I'm a non-Bigger fan. Have been ever since his kicking routine from 2011.
The fidgety
that's
routine.
One of the sad things that sort of come out of these quarters, which we'll go into a bit further. I think they might be the last time we see Bigger at a World Cup, and we're looking at some of these other quarterfinals. A lot of stalwarts for their national team just bowing out, and I'm not a fan of Bigger either, but I would have loved for him to get more of a better send-off than just a quarterfinal exit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess we're not going to see. Will we see? A Gareth Anscombe again? Will we see a George North again?
Oh no. Well, maybe.
George North he's been able to extend out his career by coming in from the wing into the centre, similar to what Tana Umanga did. So,
right.
It's just those sort of players that you've been accustomed to, the Sanchez, the Creevies,
right.
in Argentinian colours. How much more will we see of them? I think this will be Creevy's sort of swan song.
Definitely Creevy's swan song.
Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
And Sanchez probably, he's not that young anymore either. And Boffelli, will we see Boffelli probably? We'll see them playing in the, in those Northern Hemisphere club teams, but whether we'll see them in international colours again at a Rugby World Cup, it's going to be a long stretch for that Rugby World Cup in 4 years' time in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, agree with that, mate. Right, we'll look at the next quarterfinal. Probably one of the best quarterfinals I think I've ever seen at a Rugby World Cup. And that was the All Blacks, who played brilliantly. They were brilliant. To beat a valiant Irish side 28-24. Mate, Roger, I'll give you the first word on that one because I know you're Foster's number one fan. What did you make of that quarterfinal?
Intense. It was intense. It was one of those games that, and the All Blacks came out guns blazing. The way that the Irish finished that with 37 phases, the All Blacks began the game with something similar, with 30 plus. I think it was 29 or 30, just maybe just over 30 phases as well. So it was they knew that they were going to, if they were going to try and get across the line with this game with Ireland, they needed to be patient. They needed to retain possession, and for the most part they did. And they starved Ireland of the ball for most part of their first 10 or so minutes, I believe. So they were able to retain ball and just keep ball in hand, and they made the best of that particular tussle with Ireland. But obviously, once Irish got the ball with Bundy Aki, it was really tough to try and keep him at bay. But it was just an awesome game to watch, keeping you on the edge of your seat, because it was sort of interesting to see how Bundy was playing and how they were able to just keep them down. But Rico Ioane being able to get into space as well, it was just a little bit frustrating to see that they were getting starved of the ball as well at times. But I believe I was really enjoying that Tyrell Lomax had come right for the scrums, and that he was able to put in a good shift despite his earlier injuries. But Aaron Smith, again, we go back to players that we probably won't see again at a Rugby World Cup, let alone in an All Black jersey. Aaron Smith, will we see Adi Savea again in an All Black jersey post this Rugby World Cup? He's got a couple of years in Japan. But I think they all played outstanding. But, you had your Adi play his typical game leading from the front, but then you had Sam Cane pull out an outstanding shift on defense and stealing ball, tackling ball, and just frustrating the opponents and pretty much flipping the bird at O'Mahony for, saying that he was a Wish version of a Richie McCaw earlier in the piece, earlier this year. So it was just satisfying to see the All Blacks be able to pull that one off, albeit a close game. And we came in as underdogs, and Ireland as the number one. And I think, to their credit, the Irish fans had every right to believe that the Irish could pull it off and win and go even further in this competition. But I mean, as I mentioned, my teams were France and the All Blacks coming into this, and I was hoping that France would be at the World Cup final and take it out in the end. But the All Blacks, sentimentally, I'd love for them to take it out, and I haven't pulled any punches of them, giving the result for Ian Foster to be able to finish off on a high and prove a lot of the naysayers wrong in terms of the All Blacks still having their aura and being able to still be considered one of the best teams in the world.
Yep, nice thoughts here. Still some issues around the discipline as well. So we talked about this in our previous pod. We talked about the amount of penalties that they conceded, and this is way back in the opening match against France. We're talking back at that the game against South Africa and the warm-ups where they got yellow carded and red-carded out of the game. And that's come back. It didn't bite them this time, but it's something they're going to have to fix. 2 yellow cards, it's 20 minutes with 14 men. And if you keep going down that style, it's going to be an uphill battle. So still some discipline issues which they haven't sorted out. But Joey, mate, I'll get your thoughts on the game. What did you make of that quarterfinal? And I know one thing I want you to talk about as well, Rieko Ioane. He got labelled as classless. He gestured to the crowd. He gave old mate Johnny Sexton a bit of a send-off. So your thoughts on that as well as the game, Joey?
Yeah, mate. I've seen a lot of the videos going around on TikTok and that during the moment where Rico's supposedly shows his lack of class. I think, judging by the video, you can't hear the audio, and until Rico comes on here and says, and Johnny comes on here and says what was actually said, we're just speculating, right? So I think it was just banter that was given in return to a comment that was made to Rico. I don't know what it was. Maybe Rico had said something during a handshake that got Johnny a bit offside, and he probably responded to that, and then Rico responded to that with something more offensive, maybe. So, and Rico doesn't strike me as the type of guy who will just let an older bloke talk down on him just because he's an older bloke who should be respected and is probably respected on the other side of the world, and banter, I think, has its place in the sport, and I think, those two blokes probably left it on the field, whereas the rest of us and the rest of, those fans who are butthurt by it probably want to carry it on. I, for one, love, banter. I love trolling people with banter that I know that is going to get them feeling some kind of way. Because, that's just the nature of sport. Well, rugby anyway. We love throwing banter each way. And I guess a big proponent of that is George Gregan. When he made that comment, 4 more years, boys, 4 more years.
Ugh.
Well, how do you come back from that other than coming back in 4 years and beating them? but that's 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he said something to that effect. Maybe he said something talking about his retirement. Maybe he said something to the effect of, you're an old cunt. Sit down, Who knows? But at the same time, it's done. The game's over. Anyone who was butthurt by it should just let it go. And those two blokes probably got over it. They probably had a beer together after. So,
Yeah.
who knows? It's just one of those things. And plus, fans always blowing things out into proportion.
Well, classless, I don't know. I mean, you look at the haka, what are you going to say? Some people will say that the Irish fans were disrespectful for not being silent during the haka. So it's all perspective.
Exactly. It's all perspective.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, whatever. It's just whatever's said on the field. There's a lot of banter, as you say, Joey, that happens on the field. There's a lot of like niggly halfbacks that will forever just running their mouths to try and it's just part of the game, I suppose, to try and put off the opponent, the opposition. So nothing's and I still remember I was going to got a yellow card and this kid telling me all the best to going back to your factory job on a Monday, and in a club game, and all these years later, and it's their number 13 for Ireland. Was it him? He was only like probably 17 playing Premier Club Rugby for Karaka at the time, and and passing. That was his comment. I was going, who is this kid? And he's gone on to achieve some great things, not only for the Chiefs in New Zealand Rugby, but for Ireland. And I think it's a performance that he can still be proud of. But it's all part of it. Whatever happens, words is one thing. And, not everyone's going to, but I think it's just the media beat up, just taking it and just running with it and just adding fuel to the fire because the All Blacks are so disrespectful. But on the other hand, they're celebrating their win, and at the same time, it's pretty much, I don't know, what Hulk Hogan used to do, put his hand up to the ear and goes, oh, where's the noise now? Why are you silent? Or, where are my fans?
Yeah, just on the haka thing, watching the game live, I thought to myself, wow, it's so loud in that stadium. There's so many people that they're drowning out the haka that I can't even hear Aaron Smith calling the calls. I thought that was
absolutely.
You don't mind it. You don't mind it. If that's their response, all the best to them. Like when the Australians were in a huddle and George Gregan turning his back on the. Some teams are allowed to respond, however. And I know that, tangata whenua as well as Kiwis would find that disrespectful. However, that's sport and teams, they can show respect, but then they can also show disrespect to the team. If they choose to do that, then, that's part of sport. And in the same token, during play, you're allowed to do the same. You can tackle someone hard and then have a bit of a standover or a bit of verbal go-to as well. So it's what helps get people on the edge. And
it's just fans, It's just fans and media blowing it out of proportion.
So long as it's Rico not doing it when he's playing for the Blues, I don't mind.
I guess the game itself, Stace, the game itself, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
It looked like at one point in the beginning stages that the All Blacks were going to run away with it. Right? It was 13-0 at one point in the early stages. 13-0 to the ABs, right?
That's right.
And it looked like, shit, they could get another try here and another try here and just put them out of their misery. No, the Irish came back, right? They came back strong. And then my other favorite part of the game.
Bundy's
try got them back in, and it just looked...
His footwork,
it was like,
crazy,
holy
man.
heck. The man had the nerve to cut back in and just use his footwork and score a try and give them hope. You could see the fans who were quiet.
Yep.
And it was quiet during those 13 points, right? It was quiet during those 13 points. And then when Bundy scored, they started getting louder and louder again. And it was good. It was cool to watch. And then you see at the end, the 37 phases with a couple of minutes to go. And then they go overtime. It's like, wow, this is such a cool nail biter. And then, to see And I as a forward, I was like, shit, I wonder if any of our tacklers are going to have the courage to stand over the ball and try and, get a turnover. And look, who came to the rescue? It was the man himself, Sam Whitelock. I wasn't a fan of him in his early days of his career, but I've grown to become a Sam Whitelock fan. Unfortunately,
Game 151.
I can't say the same for Alan Wynne-Jones, Stacey.
Very Alan Wynne-Jones like that movie did at the end there.
But I think it was a nail biter because not long after Bundy scored, then Adi Savea scored in the corner. So that then we went out to an 18-10 lead. But then on the 39th minute, just before halftime, they had a bit of a drive and a maul, and then Gibson Park, wrong foot. I think it was
Kiwi.
Can't remember who got another Kiwi scoring a try.
Kiwi. So given that the All Blacks got the result, it's still an awesome thing to know that Ireland have come such a long way. Even though they haven't advanced past their previous, results, which is quarterfinal and not onto the semi. That's nothing. I still think this is the greatest Ireland team that has ever taken the field. Just because on the 17 successive victories, and they weren't easy victories either. They won a series win in New Zealand.
That's right.
They beat us a couple of times before. This is almost the third time in a row. So gladly they didn't get that one, but it could have easily have gone Ireland's way if Wayne Barnes had his way, maybe. But look, I think this World Cup has shown that the refs probably still are relying too much on the TMO or allowing the TMO to have too much involvement, as you saw in the Samoa game. Not saying anything, but that Samoa game, the try was well and truly scored and the conversion kicked and they're getting ready to go back to halfway and restart the game, but then the TMO, no one asked him. The ref didn't ask him. No touchies asked him, but he found it. He kept watching over that footage to find that knock-on, and it was a knock-on, to be fair. But the fact that they did it after that conversion.
The thing about that is I don't want to keep going. I don't want to go all the way back there, but if that Samoa one, if they got that try, then they win the game, then they finish third in the pool. Then we don't have to go through this qualifying. So imagine if Samoa don't qualify for the next World Cup. And then it comes back to I think, Rog, you mentioned it earlier on the podcast, how they're not actually allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the difference between third and fourth in the pool.
True.
And the ramifications of that could be huge.
Even though they wouldn't go further in the competition, absolutely, it prevents them from playing again a whole number of tier 2 nations to try and qualify again.
Right.
And
there's no guarantee as well that they're going to qualify, Whereas third's automatic qualification, fourth you got to go through the qualification process. So that's had massive implications for Samoa. Anyway, I don't want to go all the way back there, but
big ups to Ireland for for the way they played between the last World Cup and this World Cup.
Because they got but then they. I guess you mentioned it, Stacey, earlier on, the discipline, because we got yellow card, the Dane Cole's pulling down, and then it was a penalty try. So that's how close it came down to in the end, and how costly those 2 yellow cards could have been. The inconsistencies with the referee again was because Owen Farrell, Itzebeth, for South Africa, put his hand out, and that was deemed a knockback. But France. The French supporters and French team probably think that it was the other way, and that's where they questioned O'Keefe's performance, where he didn't deem that because following that, South Africa scored a try, and how much of a difference that would have made had that been called back for a deliberate knock-on penalty to France. It could have been a different sort of result. How much of a factor it would have had on the final outcome, don't know. We'll never know now. But Smith puts out a hand, marginally touches his hand. Yep, he was looking, but at the same time, Owen Farrell did the same thing. No question. But it was deemed that the ball wasn't So
I was actually sort of okay with that call because if you remember, he passes it to the guy on the inside, and if Aaron Smith doesn't get that little touch, that guy catches it and he's through, and he's 1-on-1 with Bodie, and then who knows? You know, he's if he gets past Bodie, then that's a try, or he gets tackled close to try scoring position. So I understand that it's sort of like one of those. It's inconsistent.
But it's
at the time, I
inconsistent
remember
because
thinking,
against Fiji and England, right?
yes,
Owen
right.
Farrell was in a similar predicament, yet they didn't give him a yellow card. It was just a penalty because they sort of they downgraded it because the ball wouldn't have travelled directly to the outside player, but there was an outside player, and still Owen Farrell is deliberately putting his hand out to disrupt the flow of the ball, and yet his was only a penalty, not a yellow card. Itzebit's wasn't a yellow card either. Oh no, was Itzebit's a yellow card? No, it was deemed knocked back.
Yeah, knocked back. That's right.
Yeah,
We'll touch on it a bit later, but yeah, you're right. So I was hoping that wouldn't be a major factor, but one thing that has popped up, the unconscious bias has popped up as one of those buzzwords around the referees, particularly around the Pacific nations, and now we're seeing some inconsistencies with that knock-on call, with Farrell you mentioned, and also Etzebeth, which we'll probably touch on with it when we do that review.
and then you imagine, hey guys, you imagine if anything about like the reversal of that TMO call about the try and the conversion happened to any of the Six Nations teams. Holy mate, it would go wild, go crazy, right? There would be an uproar about that kind of decision. So it happens to Samoa, England get across, they get the victory, and it's hardly anything.
Yeah.
Like the John Campbell article.
I don't know if John Campbell's part Samoan or what, but he's always stuck up for our team and stuff. So
yeah, the
shout out to
heartbreaking game.
John Campbell.
Yeah.
All right. One thing I wanted to say, Ireland, like you touched on this before, Joy, they were on a 17-game win streak. They were number one in the world by quite a lot based on the rankings. And Fozzie, to his credit, he's knocked them out of the World Cup. So, Joy, mate, I'll get you to have a word on this. You probably haven't been as hard as Fozzie as I have. But has this result sort of changed your perspective on Fozzie as a coach? Because I know he was sort of expected to lose and get knocked out at the stage by a lot of fans and a lot of people.
That's a tough one. It's a good question. It's a tough one to answer because, in a lot of ways, I'm not a Fozzie fan, but I really respect and admire how through all the criticisms that he's getting internally and externally, more externally, of course, by the general public, by the fans, and other teams and other nations. I think he's done well to prepare his team the best way he possibly can, and allow the senior members of the team to have the kind of freedom that allows a player like Sam Cane to shine the way he did. And I think Sam Cane doesn't shine unless the heat is taken off him from a leadership perspective, where others around him, senior guys like Artie and the likes, actually step up their game in terms of leadership within the team and take on various parts of that role. Obviously, the decision-making on the field still comes down to Sam Cane, but I think his job was made easier as a captain by the senior team members around him, and that's due to, obviously, the long-standing systems that they've had in place since probably Ted's time and maybe even before that, where they've got a inner sanctum of a leadership team where the older players in the team, they lay down the law for the younger players to abide by. Obviously, a couple of days, maybe hours before the game, one of those young players or new players, Mark Telea, didn't keep to team protocol. And it wasn't even a Fozzie decision. Fozzie says it was the senior team members that made the call to stand him down. And I respect Fozzie for that, for not getting in the way of the senior players making that call. And I respect the senior players of the team, of the All Blacks, for making that call, because it had to be done. You know, you set an example for any future players who come into the squad and potentially have it in their mind that they're going to play around. I'm not saying that Mark was playing around, but I hope she was worth it, because he lost the test cap, right? But, you know, it's like, okay, that's awesome that they've got these systems in place, and he trusts his players, and Sam was able to shine the way we've always wanted him to shine, and I have grown respect for not only Fozzie, but now Sam Cane as well. So,
yeah. But then you think about, because when did that come out, Joey? Because prior to that knowledge, and possibly, that there was always going to be a leadership group that probably have a say, because it go back to the Kevin Mealamu days when Aaron Cruden missed his flight, and then he had to see Kevin Mealamu, who was the leader of the pack of the leadership group, and so he was the most senior at the time, and you never wanted to be told off by Kevin Mealamu back then. So I imagine that whatever the discrepancy was from Mark Telea, that this was going to be no different. But then again, social media, people again having a crack at Ian Foster. You know, if you want to win this quarterfinal, you got to play Mark Telea regardless of what he's done. And so again, when that information comes out, you know, obviously there's processes and protocol, and it's good that the leadership group can stay to that. You know, if you're going to play up or breach any of the team protocols, then you're going to face the consequences. And if that means missing out on a game, so be it. Next person gets an opportunity. Albeit that I was a little bit concerned with Lester Fainga'anuku's performance, because he was getting run around by Hansen,
Mac Hansen,
and he had some blistering pace. So that's something that we needed to sort of shore up on the left edge, on the left side of the field. So Leicester was able to, you know, obviously make up for in other ways, but it was just that was concerning how they could easily get around our left hand side with ease. So hopefully that's something that we can sort of adjust, and they've probably addressed it. If Mark Telea comes back into the fold, then you know, we know that his defense is quite sound, but it's his attack that we definitely missed as well. And if they can go in tandem with with Will Jordan on the right wing, then we've got a winning formula, and it's going to be hard to stop them for Argentina anyway. So I think we're going to be safe moving forward in this in the semi. But yeah, I think hopefully Mark Telea comes back, learns from whatever's happened. But it's awesome that, you know, even the All Blacks are willing to stand down a team member, even at the pinnacle event.
Yeah. So Mark Telea has been named in this team to play against Argentina, so that's good. Yep. There's five Blues players that are playing. I don't expect you to know that, Ruck, because you're a Chiefs man. But
did you just have to?
Okay. I think the other thing that was obvious to me about Fozzie was he didn't play his son, and I'm sure he really wanted to chuck him on. His son being D-Mac. I'm sure he really wants to chuck him on.
Oh, he's got a few sons. Right? Sam Cane's one of his
that's
sons.
An interesting point.
I'm sure he really wanted to chuck him on. And, you know, I think he was thinking about the team and thinking about what kind of value D-Mac being brought on would add to the team. I think ultimately, he didn't bring him on for one reason or another. And I think he put the team's needs first before his own, and I respect him even more for that. Because I think
I'm not sure about that. I think it's a trust issue.
I think because then you think,
maybe that too.
It reminded me of again going back to when Fitzy didn't like being taken off, you know, subbed by Norm Hewitt, you know, and then it reminded me of that, because you got guys that are on the bench. Normally, what we're used to in the modern era now is that the bench eventually gets emptied, albeit if someone like Papali'i came on for 5 minutes. Okay? What's the impetus around that? Was it necessary? Did Kane have to be taken off? We don't know. However, he came on for 5 minutes. Christie didn't get used. D-Mac didn't get used. So I quite liked that. It was quite an intense match. And trust the players that were on there. Did we need a player like D-Mac who could add a lot of impact, but at the same time it can be disruptive with the way that he plays? And so maybe that was the safer option, just to go with the players that were on the field and trust the processes. And we didn't need to trust the defense. We didn't need D-Mac to be utilised. And it's too much has been said of tests being given to players, without really needing to. They could just use the players that are on the field. If they can, sure, all these players are conditioned to play 80 minutes plus. So, but we understand that fatigue and everything else, so, you can get a lot out of another player coming on to finish off a game. So, but it was interesting to see that we didn't empty the bench against Ireland on the weekend. And
just reminded me from Aaron Smith to Finley Christie. Even though I'm a Blues fan, I'm happy to admit that. And I wonder if he's saying the game's on the line. I don't trust Christie. I'd trust the fatigued Aaron Smith more. And it's the same with D-Mac. He's sort of he's good, but he can be a bit too rocks and diamonds sometimes. And when the game's on the line, if he's putting up rocks, that can cost you. So I'm not sure. I wonder if he just doesn't trust the guys, or it's a lack of depth or something. Because I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, I don't think
it works.
It works. So I don't think it's a lack of depth. I think it was just it was the pros and cons about bringing on a player in the dying minutes, or in obviously Kane was in the front line with throwing his body, so you can understand bringing in a fresher Papali'i just to get those last 5 minutes, make use of his energy and his impact in that way. D-Mac, I don't know. Could he have been anything different at the back there? But then you had guys like Jordie Barrett who pulled out a match winner holding up that try. And so it was just too close a game to call. And maybe there was reasonings that probably we won't ever know. We can only speculate as to why he wasn't brought on. But it was just an interesting observation, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, what up there, Joy? I thought your point about Sam Cane's is also very good, because he's been, along with Foster, them two, the captain and the coach, are the two guys who seem to copped it in the neck the most. And you think about who he was up against. He was up against Josh Van der Fleer, who's World Player of the Year last year. He was European Professional Club Player of the Year. He's the best 7 in the world. And, he got shown up. He got shown up from Kane. That was the best Kane's played for, 4 or 5 years. So,
it was superb performance by there was just so many tackles that he threw his body in, and just like good solid tackles. But then there were solid defense tackles from everyone right across the board. Ireland struggled to break the line, but when they did really well with purpose. And then similarly with the All Blacks as well.
Yeah,
just trying to penetrate. So it was just a matter of. And I think I saw somewhere where Bundy Aki's got the most stats for something.
For meters run, maybe.
Meters. Yes.
Yeah. Possibly tackles broken as well. Because he's like
81 runs. 81 runs.
Yeah.
And then, so he's in, and then the next person is Hugo Keenan, who's at 59 meters runs.
Who's on top tries scored so far in this tournament?
The wing from France.
Really?
Bundy's second.
He's pretty good.
Bundy's got 5, along with Leicester, D-Mac, Henry, and Rundle from England.
Does Mark Telea have a shot? Is he close to those figures?
I'll just get the full table.
Or Will Jordan?
Will Jordan on 5 as well.
Oh yeah, he'll get it if him or Colby will probably equal the record.
Mark Telea's got 3. Ali's got 3.
What's the record? 6.
8.
Yeah.
8 tries.
Over in history, or just at the moment?
No, in history.
Jonah got 8 one. Was that 99?
Jonah and Brian are on the same aim.
Yeah,
Habana.
15,
overall, they're on the same.
But Brian done it in 3 World Cups.
Yeah,
Jonah done it in
that's
2.
right.
No, I mean in the one tournament. Who's got the
So
highest
Jonah
in one
got 8 in
tournament?
one tournament, 99,
Jonah.
and I think that's the record. Still,
I thought Brian equaled it.
Yeah, Brian has
equal to
equalled it.
overall most tries in
Okay.
the history throughout your career of World Cups.
Oh,
Equals
shucks.
Jonah.
Imagine if
Roger's right. He played an extra World Cup. That Jonah only played 2
Right.
World Cups.
Jonah played 2.
2
So
pieces.
imagine if Jonah played in that Japanese game.
Yeah.
He didn't play in that Japan game.
Yeah,
Where Mark
That's
Ellis
right.
got the 6 tries.
tries. And Cole
So-
Hain got 33 points, I think. It still stands,
Yeah.
eh? The 33
Simon
points.
Yeah.
Nice.
Far
It's
up.
still a record.
What do you call so okay. So Ireland. Okay, so what other records are there to be broken in this World Cup still with these last 2 rounds, semis and finals? What are at risk? Which records are at risk of being beaten, if any?
Mm.
Obviously, there's the tournament wins.
Yeah,
Well,
tournament wins.
South Africa or New Zealand will be the first.
Yeah.
One of those two will be the first to get 4 if they make it that far.
Mm.
Have to add that one in there because Argentina and England may have something up their sleeve
Yeah.
to spoil the party.
The thing is, England will get 2 World Cup wins if they can do it, and they're the only team outside.
The only equalizer. The only equalizer I can see happening at the end of this World Cup would be if let's hypothetically say this weekend All Blacks lose to Argentina and South Africa loses to England and Argentina meet England in the final and Argentina win. So Argentina winning would be the most desirable result by every other team. 2
Yep.
would be the only reason why every other team would be happy.
Yep.
For a team to win other than themselves, right? Because nobody really wants England to win. Other than England. And possibly the British and Irish teams. See, right now, I see in the papers over there, and the news over there, they're all calling on the other teams like Ireland and the other Wales and Scotland to back England. Put their egos aside and put their pride aside and back England. That is funny.
Record.
That's funny.
Most finals. So New Zealand on 4 with England and Australia.
Wow.
And South Africa and France have made 3. So if New Zealand make the next final, and they go to 5. So England can go to 5 well.
But that works more in South Africa's favour, though, right? Because they missed out on the first 2 World Cups.
Yeah.
And they're 3 from 3.
Yeah.
And they're 3 from 3.
Whereas we lost that 95. But, yeah, good. We'll have a look at those stats and see if we can come up with something and put it on for our next podcast. But we'll look at that last quarter final. Boys, England versus Fiji. England scraped through 30-24. And that buzzword came up again, unconscious biasness, with some strange referee calls. But, Roger, mate, I'm not sure if you caught much of that one. What did you make of that one?
Oh, the Fiji game?
Yeah, England-Fiji.
Oh, I really enjoyed that game. I was hoping so much. But the way that I could sort of summarize the game would be that Fiji at the beginning played, obviously with their unpredictability, their flair, but then at the same time they came across quite panicked. And then the commentators summarised it later on that towards the end there, when they needed to score points, they became too conservative, which is, unbecoming of the Fiji style. But it seemed like when they were throwing it around, sometimes they just needed to settle, and they were just trying too many things, trying to do the quick offload, the 50-50 passes. But had they just settled and played the patient game, they probably could have made inroads to score, in your more orthodox way, I guess. But then that's that's not Fiji. And it was just unfortunate that, England were able to, but like I mentioned before, a few calls that went against Fiji, the referee not quite seeing that, especially on Farrell, when he put his hand out, that, he should have at least been a penalty, but it wasn't even that. Oh no, it was a penalty, but it should have been a yellow card if they were going to be consistent with Aaron Smith earlier on in the weekend getting a yellow card as well. So just those kinds of things that probably was to their detriment. But Fiji just seemed a little bit panicked and couldn't quite. And obviously England were equal to the task with the defence, but Fiji had some moments here when they came back with 20 odd minutes to go, and they were able to pull it back and score a couple of good, decent tries and keep plugging with the penalty kicks. There was some penalty kicks that Frank Lomani, I think it is, the halfback, he missed a couple of kicks, which could have been vital into getting a result against Fiji, against England, but could have made a difference. A couple of missed, but then England missed a couple as well. So, but it was a tight game. Would have loved to have seen Fiji go through. Excuse me. But it'll be interesting to see where they go to from here. How do they improve from this campaign? Because they were quite an exciting brand of rugby to watch, and again, building on all their players playing in Super Rugby, playing together, having players that are playing in the Northern Hemisphere. They could be a force to be reckoned with the proper resources given to them. Time together, cohesion can be created a lot better. But they got the Botia, man, he is a powerhouse. But I don't know if he's got another World Cup in him. Not sure how old he is, but he's an awesome player. The number 7 for Fiji. He's not your typical number 7 sort of build, but he can move for such a big man. But he is, they had some good players all right across the board. I was even impressed with their forward pack. Sorry, their scrummaging was so much they could hold against. They held their own against some of their these bigger powerhouses, but a lot of it comes down to not only the players in the front row playing in real good competitions abroad, but Graham Hughes. I'm not sure if you remember Graham Hughes, Joey. He's their scrum coach, or he's an assistant coach as well.
Yep, so, for sure.
Former Fiji international, as well as Counties Manukau player, and coaching the Taniwha of recent times too.
Yeah,
but I was just really impressed with Fijian scrummaging, because obviously we can talk till the cows come home about their outside backs and their rangy flankers, loose forwards, but their whole scrum as a whole, set them apart from our other Pacific nations. Samoa had moments as well, but Fiji weren't a pushover, and as we've sort of seen them in the past to be.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree with all that, man. Fiji, they've grown and they were flying the flag again for the Pacific nations as they usually do. And good that you brought up Botia. He's a real interesting character. He's at La Rochelle, and he, you're right, he plays traditionally number 7, but he also fills in for La Rochelle in the midfield. He can play 6, 7, 8, or 12, 13. And I don't know any other players in the professional game who can fill in there. He's also played a couple of games on the wing for La Rochelle.
Wikipedia's got him as a centre, flanker, and wing.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah, I was just going to mention that he's filled in a couple of games for La Rochelle on the wing as well. So that's unbelievable that someone could do that. But Fiji have really gone. Joy, mate, I'll get your thoughts on the game, but also what's next for them. Should we be looking to add them to the Rugby Championship as well on the back of their growth?
Absolutely. Look, I think they are in ripe position to bloody be added, and I think they should. It's if World Rugby wants to be seen as globalizing the game in its truest sense, then a move like that to make Fiji part of the championship it's a given. It's a no-brainer. Like they deserve it, and they're in the top 10 consistently. And I think just speaking to one of your points there, Rog. Yeah, I've played alongside. I've had the pleasure of playing alongside Graham Juicy in the lower grades with Ponsonby before he went to Marist, and he was such a talented scrummager. He was such a talented footy player, and he was a bit of a loss for Ponsonby, but Ponsonby was spoiled with some good props back then, and unfortunately it forced the young Bucks' hand to go to Marist and get some starting games with the top side over there that he probably wouldn't have enjoyed at Ponsonby if had he stayed. And his scrummaging knowledge and experience has obviously paid dividends for Fiji's set piece. That Fijian scrum has really come into its own, and it has definitely competed at that level of tier 1 against tier 1 nations, especially. And they've held their own for sure. What I'm wondering now in hindsight for Fiji is whether that poor bloke Tuisova now regrets not going back for the funeral of his child. But obviously, it was a tough decision for him to make. I'm not sure whether he had any good advice or support from within, or whether, whatever led him to that decision to stay. I hope he can, live with it, and I hope it doesn't eat him up like I think it would. But that's obviously his business, and fair play to him and good luck to him, and I hope it doesn't take away from his amazing talent. Obviously, he's a fan favorite, and he's a real rugby man, a team man, and we love watching him. He's such a strong player, ball in hand. He's devastating, and he doesn't need that much space to score tries out wide. So
it was interesting that they played him at 12, in the midfield as opposed to his normal wing position. I know him to play.
He's a finisher. Absolutely. He's a finisher. He's not a battering ram. He's a finisher. He just knows how to smash out of bloody tackles. He knows how to get out of tackles easily, and it's better done out wide rather than in the midfield where he's probably not used to, the optimized level that we all know and love from him. But I guess the Fiji as a collective, honestly, it was such a joy to watch. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see them advance on further than quarterfinals. That's fine. I think the next World Cup will see an even stronger World Cup, stronger nations, closer than ever. And hopefully Samoa's up there. Hopefully Samoa can, and Tonga as well. I'd like to see Samoa and Tonga do better. They both had some talented players on both teams. And unfortunately, the results didn't go either of their way. But look, they both made their nations proud, made us proud. So, well done to Fiji for flying the flag once again for the Pacific. It's always a pleasure to watch Fiji when they're at the height of their game, using their flair, but now they've added some structure to that. They're so dangerous. So dangerous.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with all that. So congrats to Fiji. Well done, man. That weren't actually quite a tough pool when you consider, they had a couple of tier 1 nations in there ahead of them, ahead before the pools came out. So for them to get through, you got to give them some credit. And they are another team. All the teams, all the quarters were quite close. But they're a team who felt that they possibly could have won that quarter as well. So, no, there's 4 teams going home who will all be feeling like that, feeling like, shucks, we could have won our games. But it would have been amazing for Fiji to get through to the semis, like you mentioned. So hopefully they get added to that rugby championship and get, the World Rugby, and that can help to do a bit more to push them up to tier 1 status.
You guys mentioned the rugby championship, but there's that talk that it was even mentioned in John Campbell's article, about the World League or the Nations Cup, whatever they're going to be calling it. So some sort of top tier where a universal season that they have with some of the international teams, and that's going to be kicking off in 2026. So just before the next Rugby World Cup, so it'll be interesting to see who is included in that, and whether even the likes of Samoa, will they get a shot? So we don't know who's going to be a part of that. But again, it's something that, what are World Rugby planning to do with these Tier 2 nations, such as the Pacific ones? So will they get a look into that, or will they be, what's the follow-up on the Six Nations with that small inclusion that Georgia and Fiji had a part to play in a couple of seasons ago as well? So
yeah, that's right. That was interesting. With a lot of these rugby tournaments, a lot of it boils down to money. So that's why the Pacific teams have been left out for a long time, because they just don't generate the funds. And it's the same with Georgia. They don't have the same money. If you look at how much money Italy generate for the Six Nations, they're getting 50,000+ to watch them get pumped. So, the ticket sales are there, the TV viewership's there, and as long as that's there, they're still making the money, and they'll stay in there. Even though Georgia, theoretically, if they had been in there for the last 4 or 5 years, they'd probably be better than where Italy's at now.
Big time. But that's the resources, right?
Yeah.
It's the resource behind it. And then, and then you get a scoreline like, with a France and South Africa, 29-28. It's understandable. These are two powerhouses in world rugby. But then you get a Fiji just losing marginally to an England, 30-24, or Samoa losing by 1 point. And then you look at the resource that's behind England, the time that they have together that they can only take for granted, because Samoa don't have that luxury, nor do Fiji, and yet they can lose by a few points. And John Campbell talks about it. Don't be sucked into the narrative of a noble defeat and the brotherhood and the beautiful spirit of rugby or the cup, because that's just an inconvenient dress up, because it suits the rugby's power imbalance and resources imbalance and opportunities imbalance too much. But it's just that there's not going to be an equal playing field. There wasn't back in 1991, and there still isn't in 2023. And yet we're going to get close results like this. Is it because of the improvement, or is it because of the resources that are behind the powerhouses? But yet, with all that resource, with all the time that they get together, they beat Samoa by 1 point. They just do enough. They beat Fiji by 6 points. And yet, Fiji and Samoa don't even have half of their resources combined as two countries.
It's definitely tier 1 and tier 2 in every sense of the word, with the resources that they get and the help that they get. So it's really it's got to be on World Rugby. The overseeing organisation, and they have to have a bit more foresight about what the game's going to look like in 5 to 10 years, because Fiji could be something. They can legitimately be something in 10 odd years. If, the seeds and the embers that have started now are allowed to grow a bit more, but that's not going to happen. Similar to Georgia, they've sort of stagnated. They've been in the same spot for sort of, last 2 or 3 World Cups, where they've got some valiant performances, but they're just not kicking on. And look at where they are. They can't get much tier 1 games similar to what Samoa's getting as well. So, nothing changes if nothing changes, I guess.
Right.
But we'll look forward. We're running a bit over time, so quick look at France, South Africa. So again, another outstanding quarterfinal. And if you look at that New Zealand quarterfinal and this quarterfinal, if that was the World Cup final, you would have been happy as Larry with the quality of these two games against, we're seeing two top 4 teams playing, all top 4 teams playing each other on the quarters, which is a bit of something about the draw, which we won't go into. But, Mike Joy, what did you make of that one? France, South Africa, 29-28 to South Africa. It was.
Intensity was just as good as the All Blacks Ireland game, I thought. It didn't quite have the same ending, but it did have a great ending, right? Like, cometh the man, cometh the hour. Eben Etzebeth scored a try, and there's a shot there where you can see the former captains. What's her name? Smith, and what's the lock's name? With the long hair. South Africa.
For South Africa.
No.
Steinman. Is that the one?
Yeah.
No, the long hair. No,
sometimes.
sorry, the old school one. Matfield. Victor Matfield. Fuck no.
Matfield.
Memory shot to shit. So there's a shot there where John Smith and Victor Matfield are looking at each other as Eben Etzebeth scores the try. They look at each other. They give themselves that look like, phew. But at the same time, we've won because he's going to get the kick over to win the game, right? So that was another nail biter, and it's what's made this World Cup for me. This knockout stage, the quarterfinals alone, have been enough for me to go, you know what? Any more wins from the All Blacks is a bonus, because that Ireland game was a final in itself. The fact that you could see Sam Cane and all the bench just celebrating like it was a very important game, and it was, obviously it was, given it's a World Cup and it's a quarterfinal, must win, But I think the satisfaction of beating a team who are on such an unbelievable run under Andy Farrell, who has taken this team and just taken it to the next level. It's like hats off to Andy Farrell. He was no slouch himself in rugby and league, especially league, because that was his sport before he came over to rugby. And look, it's nice as a fan. It's nice. It's not quite champagne rugby, the way we know those French games can go, but usually against the All Blacks. But you saw two teams who played two different styles. One was just pure juggernaut, ram it up and brute force your way to the try line and drive, use all your strength and your big size to get past the defenders. And then you saw the French team, who were just as strong and had, just out and out speed and fitness over some of their counterparts. But in other areas, you had a couple of Islander boys. I don't know where those other boys are from, but I know Wingy Atonil. He's a Timaru boy who went to Wesley College, and I had the pleasure of meeting the young fella over there in England when he was he's still playing for La Rochelle, but he was up on holiday in the northern parts, and I got to meet him and hang out with him for a couple of days. And he's such a character off the field, as you would know of any Samoan boy from Auckland, or who spent some time in Auckland. And it was just nice to see France at that level. Unfortunately, one team had to lose, and on this occasion it was France. And South Africa ground out a win to get themselves a semi-final. And for me, I like the banter side as much as I like, the competition. From that game, there's some memes that have come out about Rassie Erasmus, their coach, South African coach, saying some inappropriate things, to say the least, but they're quite funny. And it's all banter. He's throwing some banter Ireland and France's way that they can still make the final. All they have to do is just buy tickets, and they'll be able to be at the final. So that's banter to me. That's the kind of level of banter that I think Rieko Ioane has. But we won't go into that because we've already touched on that. But yeah, it was a good game by France and South Africa. And hats off to France for putting on such a special tournament. Some of those stadiums are just amazing. Very well kept.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I agree with that. Another good game. I think they had 6 tries in the first half, and they were just going try for try. and you want to see beautiful rugby. Another one that could have gone down to the wire. So I know that I think off air, Joey, you talked about Colby and how good he was, but he did this chase where when they try and do the kicks and you tell your winger, I'll go and chase the kick, and normally they're like, oh,
Yeah.
what the hell for? Waste my time. And that was like, he went and chased after it. He charged down the conversion. You think they won by 1 point. Imagine if that conversion goes over, then they'd lose by 1 point. So, it's just one of those plays that demonstrates the importance of competing on every play. And Colby, he was, he embodied that. So, man, he's a beast. But Rog, mate, I know you got a soft spot for France. So, what did you make of that quarterfinal?
Oh, another nail biter, edge of the seat, just similar to the Irish and the All Blacks game. Because, like as you mentioned, 3 tries apiece. They're just going toe to toe. Colby put in a good shift. Cyril Bay, prop for France, getting 2 tries.
Yes.
Man, it's crazy. But then the Etabit try, sort of just before the 70th minute, I think it was. They brought them back in, and then a penalty that took them ahead. But I think it was just good running rugby. It's a bit had quite a massive hand in that first try to South Africa. What's the other winger's name?
Trenser.
He wears the headgear. He's quick, and
Pino,
so he scored. Yeah.
yeah. Curtly Adrinta, yeah.
Malvaka, I've been watching him play throughout the tournament. Beato Malvaka, New Caledonian, I believe they are. Heritage. So him, and there's the big lock that comes on as well. I think they're both of New Caledonian heritage. So, but Beato Malvaka, who plays for, I can't remember the team he plays for, but he's won a few. Toulouse. He plays for Toulouse. Won a few championships. So, as a hooker, he's quite mobile, good offload, good running game. But he scored a try in that quarterfinal as well. But I just felt sorry for France in a way with Dupont coming in wearing the headgear. I'm not sure what the headgear
was protecting his mind
was
games.
protecting in terms of his fractured cheek that he had surgery on. But it could have gone either way in South Africa. Just they would have come out on top there. But again, really exciting quarterfinal. It just capped off, a quartet of amazing quarterfinals that could have gone either way for all the teams. And it just goes to show how important it was for all of the teams involved. New Zealand to get through. It could have easily been Ireland. But then South Africa showing, why they are the world champions from the previous one and why they're not going to let go of their title that easily. So it was always going to be a tough one to see who was going home at quarterfinal time, especially for the top 4. So it was unlucky that France were the ones that bowed out so early, similarly to Ireland as well. But then the same could be said for Wales.
Can it? I don't know.
But yeah, I was excited. I think for the All Blacks Ireland game, it was probably the most excited I got for an All Blacks game early in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. But then for the French and South Africa game, it was just frustrating to watch because as much as I wanted France to win that game, and they were showing all the signs to win, and right from the get go when O'Neill was at the beginning of that rolling maul that they had, which led to Cyril Bay scoring that try in the corner, the first try. But that was just that big forwards again. Everyone was on. It was parity with the scrummaging. But when he got to O'Neill, will we see him again? Will we see Fiku? Fiku's still quite young, probably young enough.
He's only 29, Fiku. He's just been around for ages. He started when he was in his teenage years.
No, there you go. And then you got Dupont, you got Intermac that, hopefully touch wood, in 4 years' time, he'd be okay for a World Cup. He was a huge miss, but then you had Pinaud, who's got the most tries for France at the tournament, most tries of any player at the moment, leading into these semi-finals. So they've just had some gun players right across the board, but then South Africa, no slouches as well. Deland as well in the midfield. Pollard and them all coming on, to seal off the game at the end. So it was an interesting call, Khaleesi coming off at the 45th minute. But then my impact player of the game was Quagga Smith.
Yeah.
He was a beast. Some of his carries, and technicality in terms of some players getting penalised for when they're trying to jackal or win the ball from a ruck, their hands go onto the ground. And to be fair, Quagga Smith, he stole it really well, but I think it was in the All Blacks game that Sam Cane was getting pinged as well for having his hand not supporting his weight, and in Fiji as well. But then there were some calls missed, and Quagga Smith steal, a vital steal. His hand was on the ball, on the ground as well. So it's just those little, intricacies that have been missed. But then it's just such a fast-paced game that you can also forgive any referee for missing that, because it just happens at real quick lightning speed, unless you get the luxury of a replay. And those things are not going to be called on by a TMO in real time anyway. So unless you're Samoa, anyway.
Yeah. Interesting you put up those guys from the bench, because you look at South Africa, you got Quagga Smith, Andre Pollard, Faf de Klerk, RG Snyman
as well.
So their bench can take it up to the next level. When you compare that to New Zealand and what we just talked about with the All Blacks, they had McKenzie, they had Christie, who for whatever reason they didn't put on. And it feels like that South African bench can come on and take it up a level, and the New Zealand bench is a little bit 50-50 if we trust them. That's only my own interpretation of why they didn't come on.
It's an interesting comparison. But then, and then you had the French. I felt sorry for the French prop, the one that lost the ball forward in that last play. Because, he had good impact as well when he had come on. He had given away a couple of penalties, but he lost a ball. But then that was the most notable one was the when that ball spilled the ball, and then all South Africa had to do was kick it out, because they had made a good drive up the middle of the field with the hope of trying to get a drop goal in or a penalty. But they were just trying to be patient. But then, just losing the ball there, and the hopes of France along with it.
Yeah, good thoughts there. We're going a bit over time. Looks like Joey, you've gone so much over time. Joey's having some technical issues with his battery. But we'll look at some of the semi-finals. So, All Blacks against Argentina, the first semi-final. Rog, mate, what are your thoughts? So give us a prediction as well about how you think the game's going to go.
I think Argentina, they're going to come out firing with a lot of passion, as we know the Argentinians have. They're going to have massive support around the stadium. But I believe, despite Boffelli, Sanchez, who I believe probably will start, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the squad, but I reckon he should start. Then you got Creevy, these guys got a lot to play for. Probably the last time that we see a lot of them. Even their lock, you see the emotion. I forget his name. Not Crema. Crema's a 7. The lock with the headgear. It's quite he's like the Itzabeth, but he's
Guido Petty, not that one. Or Lavanini.
You see the passion and how much that quarterfinal win meant to them.
Yeah.
And how much further will they go against the All Blacks? They're going to throw everything. They know they can do it. They've done it in the past. Just last year, they've beaten them before. It'd be a massive upset if the Argentinians would pull another one over the All Blacks, but I just can't see it happening. Reason being, because you got Sam Cane, Adi Savia. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at them, and they're gonna, I reckon they'll put 20 points on them easy.
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna. I think it might be closer, but also gonna go the All Blacks there. I think that was an outstanding performance. And Argentina, like you mentioned, because they got to win. They've had a pretty good record recently, so they're not coming in thinking, "Oh, we can't do it." Like how they probably would have thought, say, 5,
They'll be
6 years ago,
confident. They'll be confident.
before they got that monkey off the back. But now it's off, and now they've got a couple of wins. They're like, you know what? The All Blacks ain't that scary beast they used to be.
That's it.
We can beat them.
Like Scotland thought that before, they thought this is their best chance to beat the All Blacks, given the All Blacks run into the Rugby World Cup in the last 18 months or so. It's if any team, if the All Blacks are going to lose to any team, then this is the best time for any team to take advantage of that. And Argentina are looking at that as well. But then they've seen the form and the aura that's coming back with the All Blacks, right? And the form and the players that are putting in the performances and getting those results. So it's not going to be easy for Argentina. It's not saying that it's impossible, but it's going to be a long day at the office. And I think the All Blacks, with everything that's riding on this game and the swan song for a lot of the players at a possible, they don't want to be playing third and fourth. They want to be playing for gold. So there's so much riding on it. I think the All Blacks will now the support, albeit with a lot of the bandwagon supporters coming back and seeing that it's possible, because a lot of people wrote the All Blacks off that they wouldn't even make it out of the pool, let alone make it past the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
After they lost their first game against, well, maybe not yet, because even Italy had a show. Even Italy apparently had a show, but then, close to 100 points put on them.
Right.
But I think it was just a form coming in. A lot of people thought that they definitely wouldn't make it past the quarterfinals. But here we are. Now it's only 2 games away for the big dance. So I'm hoping that we can go all the way and just let Foster right off into the sunset.
Nice.
One happy chappy.
Yeah, hopefully that happens. Just looking at the team that got selected. So Mark Talia straight back in for Whainganuku. Are you happy with that call?
Absolutely, yeah. I think Whainganuku is just... Unfortunately, Whainganuku is just one of those guys that was able to come in, with Mark Talia being stood down last week. Whainganuku did the job, but he knows that. Is he on the bench, Steve?
Nah, he's out. It's the same bench. Anton Leonard-Brown and Mackenzie still hold. So Whainganuku's out the team this week.
Those are our 2 outside backs, eh? Mackenzie and Anton Leonard-Brown. But yeah, I guess that makes sense. Mark Talia, he's got a lot to be thankful for his inclusion, and I think he'll repay that trust and the faith that the management as well as the senior leadership has shown in him, because we all know what he can do. We know how hard he is to contain. I think he's gonna run rampant against Argentina, that if they don't bar up in defence and do what they did against Wales and show what they can do against bigger opposition. Similarly, what they can do against and how disruptive they can be against the likes of what they showed against Samoa as well. So, but they've been there. They know the players. They've played with these players, played against them players a lot more regularly in the last 5 or so years. But then you've got a bench. Look, with Creevy coming off the bench, he's one to watch out for. And I think if this is going to be his last game, he's going to throw everything at it, hoping for one more against for the title. But regardless, all these 4 teams are going to play 2 games, right?
That's right. It's
a matter of which one is it going to be, a third or fourth?
Which one is it going to be?
Or first or second. So, but I can't see the All Blacks losing this one. Hopefully, they can do the job, but yeah, I see them just being too strong for Argentina. Unfortunately, just from what we've seen it at this Rugby World Cup, what we know each player can do. Sam Whitelock becomes the most winningest, if that's such a word, the most victorious Rugby World Cup player. I think he's got 21 wins now.
Wow.
As an All Black, and Richie McCaw's got 20, and then it goes lower than that. I think the records are... Yeah. Malamu's got 19, Sonny Bill Williams 18 Rugby World Cup wins, but
What?
Sam Whitelock is 21 now, and he could even add to that. So
Nice.
Bowden Barrett joins the 100 Test matches wins. He's the sixth player to reach 100 Test match wins, behind McCaw, Whitelock, Malamu, Reid, and Woodcock, and now Bowden Barrett. So yeah, I don't think anyone should be too worried about Argentina, but it's, again, semi-final footy, anything could happen.
That's right.
Upsets happen. History is there for the making, but I can't emphasise enough that the All Blacks are going to be too strong, but it's going to make for an exciting game nonetheless, so definitely be up for watching that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with you points there. I think we're on the same page on that one. I think All Blacks, I think it might be closer, maybe 10, but well, I think we're on the same page there. We'll look at that next semi-final. So South Africa against England. So England are the only undefeated team left in the World Cup. How are you seeing that one?
Yeah, that's a good point. The undefeated team in the World Cup. But against South Africa, again, I just see South Africa just being too strong. They've got an amazing bench, as you mentioned. If that's unchanged, then they're going to feel the wrath of that as well. Similarly to what France felt in those final minutes. Quagga Smith coming off the bench. Can't beat that. He's just raw power, and just fits as anything. Throws his body at anything. You got Faf de Klerk as well. He can be such a disruptive player, but in your face, but then so nippy and very evasive. So he could, do what a Gibson Park did with, sniping around that ruck area.
Yep.
And Faf de Klerk does it very well, similar to an Aaron Smith, but is it who are the English? I don't even know who the English halfback is. Danny Keir? No, not Danny Keir. Young.
No, I don't even know as well.
But yeah, I just
Ben
feel
Youngs, no, he's probably gone too. I don't even know who they got anymore.
I think it's just gonna be a good match. I just want Owen Farrell his smile to be wiped off his face. But he's just one of those players you love to hate, I suppose. But they've got some good players. Courtney Laws, Itoje, they've been around a wee while now, so they're seasoned campaigners. They know what it takes to get the job done. Will it be another 3 points, a drop goal difference? It sees him through to another final. England have been there before. They've won it once before. They've probably got Manu Tuilangi, similar to a Bundy Aki, who's going to be looking to punch those holes up in the middle and test the defence. But I don't know, Stace. I'm a little bit divided on this one. Hesitant to make a call.
Well, I'll help you out a little bit here because I was about to give you a shout out. So when we did our pre-tournament predictions, where is it? You picked the All Blacks to play England or Samoa in the final.
Oh.
Now, obviously, Argentina took Samoa's spot in that qualifying, so now they're going to play in the semis. So you picked All Blacks to play England, which at the time sounded ridiculous, but that might actually happen. So I'm not sure if you're going to stick with your predictions from way back a month and a half ago, if you going to chop and change because South Africa's actually been really impressive. I was actually amazed how good they've been. But one thing I wanted to say just before you carry on there, Rog, and this is something that Cameron brought up while we were talking before the podcast started, Cameron, our editor. So England have had possibly the easiest run to get to the semis. So they had Argentina in the first game, which was their hard game. Then they've had sort of easy-ish games. They played a gallant Fiji in the quarters. But they've had an easy-ish run. So they're sort of quite fresh. I mean, you compare that to South Africa, right? So they played Ireland, who was the number one team in the world. That was in their pool. Scotland, that was the fifth-ranked team in the world in their same pool. Then they just played second-ranked France in the quarters. So I think South Africa has actually had the hardest run to get to the semis, and England has had the easiest run. So I'm not sure if that plays in any of that factors in any of your thinking, mate.
Easiest run, but then they've had some close wins. Some teams.
Right. So they just beat Samoa and all the rest of it, but they've been playing tier 2 nations. That's who they've been playing. And it feels like they've sort of just cruised their way to this point. So I don't know if fatigue is going to be a factor, but we've seen sort of in previous World Cups, right? Previous World Cup iterations, the teams will play sort of their best game, and then they'll struggle to back it up. So it's that old saying that we played our final a week early type scenario. So you think about England, for example, they played the game of their lives in that semi-final 2019 World Cup against the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And then they were basically running on fumes in that final and got blown away. So I wonder if you have any sort of thoughts around that potentially happening again, particularly with South Africa and New Zealand, given the quarterfinals they've had. Will they be sort of okay mentally and physically to get up again? Or is that fatigue going to be a legit factor?
I mean, it's always a contentious argument, but I think just with the quality and the caliber of players that both New Zealand and South Africa have, I think they knew well in advance, months and months before this tournament had even commenced, that this is what was needed to be conditioned and hardened enough for a tournament like this, and the possibilities of who they would play and the schedule and how tough the schedule would be, how many tier 1 nations, how many top 10 teams would they be playing, let alone top 4, and to be at this point where they have had a run where they've had to play South Africa, Ireland, and the like, albeit that England haven't had as an intense a run. But I think South Africa, despite their tough run that they've had, I think they're ready for it. As much as I would like to say I'll back up my prediction, and I'll tell you why, is that my prediction was probably based on not understanding that it crossed over at the...
That was my fault, yeah. I'll help you with that.
That it crossed over after the pools crossed over.
Right.
After the quarterfinals. And so that was on that basis. And so, yep, I could easily stay with that. But I think South Africa, as you say, and they're just so impressive with that, the way that they were playing against France. France were equally as impressive. So it was an impressive quarterfinal.
Yeah.
But it's just how clinical that South Africa can be. And I think it's the presence that South African players have, and none more so than Itzebets as well. So, but then they've got guys that can come on. Vermeulen that starts at number 8. You got Detroit as well.
Yeah, former World Player of the Year Detroit as well.
Exactly. So he's, you got these world class players that right across the board, and then you don't even have to look twice at your bench. So these guys can come off, and they've been there, done that. Some of them have been playing a long time, and this could be, the swan song for a lot of them as well. So they've been sort of targeting this particular tournament, especially this deep in the tournament as well. So, albeit 1 point win against France, they know it's a clean slate. They're looking to get the win to be able to get there for the final, and whether that be against New Zealand, against an unlikely opponent in Argentina. If Argentina do New Zealand and then they get into the final either against England and South Africa, they'll be rubbing their hands at, at having a chance at winning it against an Argentina. But that's the challenge for Argentina. New Zealand are going to be too strong, and I believe, as annoying as England is, South Africa will be too good. South Africa will be too good. So it'll be New Zealand, South Africa final. England, Argentina will play that for playoff third or fourth.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at probably 7 points. South Africa to beat England.
Nice. Just on that, South Africa's picked an unchanged 23 from that brutal. That was pretty brutal as well. That quarters.
Yeah. There's no sign of fatigue there, and just trust in their players, and the players probably want it no different, And so that's crazy when you think of that unchanged team. And similarly with New Zealand, right? New Zealand's unchanged.
Oh, just Mark Talia back in. That's really the only.
So again, these guys they've prepared for this particular game, this tournament, as much as they can to be able to be in a position where they can back up week after week, regardless of who the opponents are. So it might be noticeable from a spectator's point of view, but I think South Africa will play the game of their lives and then look forward to a grand final showdown with the Kiwis, the All Blacks.
I think we're on the same page. My only concern is that point that I raised about that fatigue factor, because both teams, South Africa and New Zealand, they played the game of their lives last week, and what that's taken out of the petrol tank, who knows? I mean, and we do have history of teams being absolute behemoths in the quarters or the semis.
New Zealand, have we had history? Because I know you mentioned England in the last World Cup against New Zealand. Yeah, they played the game of their lives and they lost in the final. I remember at France against New Zealand in '99.
Yes.
They played that game and they beat us with Jonah Lommel scoring 2 tries, and then they went on to lose the final against Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
So, who knows? And Australia did it in 2003. They beat the All Blacks. And then there was the 4 more years, and they went on to lose against England.
Yeah, that's right. So, we've actually got quite a few examples. And that's my only concern, because I think on paper, they both look like mismatches on paper. It feels like if you just looked at the teams, you think, well, both teams won easily.
Yeah. History and form I would say All Blacks South Africa get through comfortably, but paper's one thing and form is one thing.
Yeah.
But on the day, it could go either way. Similarly, you wouldn't have. I couldn't sort of see France getting knocked out at a quarterfinal, and a lot of the Irish would think there's no way that that New Zealand would get past Ireland.
Well, that was my prediction. I predicted Ireland to play France and to beat France in the final, and that looks pretty crap now that both teams have been knocked out early on. So, and I think that comes back to what we talked about this right at the start of the World Cup. So this could be the most competitive World Cup we've seen, and we're still through the quarterfinals. All 8 teams had a chance of winning all of those quarters, and the semis is not as guaranteed as a lot of people might think as they would be on paper because of the other factors as well. So this is possibly the closest World Cup we've ever had, which is good for the tournament. But
that is the, I guess, the kicker in how you can defend the results that the All Blacks have had.
Yeah,
and I know it's taken away from the record and the aura that the All Blacks, were perceived to have, but it's just the improvement of rugby nations right across the board in the last 4 years, at least. And so that's where I believe a lot of the New Zealand supporters just need to have a little bit of grace given to New Zealand and the All Blacks for having dropped the odd game against Argentina a series against Ireland, and then before that, a couple of losses to Ireland as well. But it's only made this tournament, this version of the Rugby World Cup, this edition, a better spectacle to watch, I believe. So, and you've seen the improvements from the Japan, even the Georges, Samoa to an extent, but then the obvious ones are seeing the inclusion of 3 South American countries at one Rugby World Cup. It's never happened before with Chile, Uruguay, and Argentina. And then you got Ireland coming in as ranked number 1, and France beating New Zealand, first time ever that they lose in a pool match. So there's all these results happening, all because the landscape is a lot more level, and to a degree, to the contrary, what we spoke to in relation to Samoa and some of the Tier 2 nations. But as a whole, especially when we come to the top 8, it's quite even, and it could go either way, and it has gone either way. So,
yeah. And I think there's probably a deeper subject, which we won't go into now, probably another podcast in itself, where New Zealand's future is tied to Australia. Because we were playing Super Rugby with them, we're playing Bledisloe Cup with them every year, and if they're going to be Gaia, that pulls us more and more down. While, you look at rugby in Europe, you look at what's going on in Ireland and France and all the rest of it. Ireland and France played in the under-20s World Cup final against each other. So they've got, not only are they good now, even though they lost the quarterfinals, the next generation of kids coming through are the best kids in the world at the moment. So, that's a podcast for another day. But that looks good in Europe, and we know how strong the game is over there. Even though in New Zealand it's sort of not, it feels like it's not as strong as it used to be. Worldwide, the point that you make, Rog, it's stronger than it's ever been. You could make that argument. So, good points there. But that's quite a comprehensive review of the World Cup thus far. We're just about to close up our podcast, also. We'll just get some final thoughts from you in closing, and then we'll wrap up the pod.
I think there's nothing to see here with the classless gestures that Rieko Ioane pulled out. I think that's just part of rugby. We've seen it before with Rieko. We know that he can be controversial, but I think it's just a bit of media beat-up, to say the least. The Pumas wished him all the best against the All Blacks this weekend. There's a lot of South Americans, a lot of Argentinian backing for Los Pumas to go one better and to make a World Cup final. I think it's going to be a tough ask. One day they'll get there, it just won't be this weekend. And looking forward to this weekend's rugby, and go Los All Blacks.
Nice. Yep. Yeah. I agree with all that. Yeah. So the World Cup, I'll say, it's been outstanding, actually. And the results largely unpredictable, which is what you want. So, hoping the semis live up to the high standards of that we set in the quarters. And to some of the teams that were eliminated, I hope they learned a lot and come back stronger next time around. And a special shout out to Fiji. We talked about this before, but again, they're left carrying the torch for the Pacific Islanders. And I do hope that they're part of the Rugby Championship, because if that happens, I think they will win a World Cup or make a World Cup final in the next sort of decade if they're allowed to play Tier 1 nations regularly as part of the Rugby Championship. Also, I'll give a big shout out to Fozzie, who I never give any credit to on this podcast. I didn't think he could do it. I picked Ireland to win it. I picked him to win the World Cup. So for him to knock out, basically the team that was the best team in the world, he knocked them out. And he deserves a ton of credit for that. So looking back on the year that we've had,
It's a massive accolade. Thank you, Stacey. For admit that you're speaking on behalf of the nation then.
It took 3 years, 10 months of his tenure to get here, but of his 4-year tenure to get here. But hey, he deserves credit. And I just want to say, looking back on the year that we've had, all I've heard up here in Auckland and around is, up the waz, and the amount of support and goodwill the Warriors have received. it's almost sacrilege to think that would happen while the All Blacks are in a World Cup year. And that's why I think it's really important for the All Blacks to do well in this tournament, to win the fans back and get everyone falling back in love with the All Blacks again. And that quarter-final win, I think that has gone a long way to restoring a lot of that faith. So credit where credit's due, Fozzie. Well done. Yep. And I'll leave us with that to the counter ruck. You carry on, Rich. Were you going to say something?
No, and Captain Fantastic too.
Oh, yes, of course. Another guy's been pillarized. But it looks like these guys keep their receipts, because he got told he was a wish version of Richie McCaw. He's held that in for 14 months and he's come back and blown them off the park. So he's one of those. He's like, you say that to him and he'll remember it for the next time. So well done to Captain Fantastic. I'll give him credit too. But yep, boys, the Counter Ruck is available through the usual podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube now, and many more. So keep listening and watching, and don't forget to click subscribe. Joey's not here, but Rog, mate, thanks for jumping on the pod, sharing your rugby knowledge and your enthusiasm. Cam helping out with the editing. Thanks, that's us. So we'll be back again shortly.
Go Blacks!
Nice.